I have no intention of convincing anyone that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Wonder Woman 1984 are incredible films that should be universally adored. I can recognise many of the reasons for the relatively negative reception these films have received, and I can appreciate several of the key criticisms out there. These films have historical inaccuracies, plot threads that don't lead anywhere, questions of consent around Steve returning in another man's body, unnecessary scenes, unnecessary destiny subplots, and what kind of comes across as a gross suggestion that being a successful woman equals being good in heels. Though I have my suspicions that the filmmakers were actually trying to say the opposite of this, but they just forgot to include the punchline. These films are filled with all sorts of superhero tropes from the last few decades, some of which may feel outdated and perhaps we shouldn't as a society want to keep proliferating. There are two-dimensional characters and paper-thin themes, though a part of this video will be me talking about how I don't necessarily see those things as negatives. Just because something is two-dimensional, that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. The moments of visceral awe, of raw performance, of wonder and amazement are what make me really like these movies. Aesthetically and emotionally, they're everything I want from a big superhero sequel. Colourful, playful, inspiring, and honestly above all, angsty as hell. Sure, they're not as tight as, say, Spider-Man 2, but they're also not quite as rambly as something like Batman v Superman. Though being rambly is actually one of the handful of things I like about Batman v Superman, but now I'm confusing things. Wonder Woman 1984 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 are both follow-ups to modern reboots, which retold the origin stories of these characters, thereby leaving the possibilities wide open for this second installment. They both have long runtimes, they both feature multiple iconic villains, they both have great scores by Hans Zimmer, and they were both poorly received by critics and audiences. In my view, the creative thrust of these films is so similar that I'm surprised Wonder Woman 1984 was allowed to be made the way it was. I'm glad it was though, because I really like both these movies. To me, they're the same saccharine, sentimental, stylish mess. A bit more broadly, I think these films fit into a category I'm inventing right now, which I am calling kitchen sink sequels. Along with flicks like Dead Man's Chest and The Last Jedi, these are all long, big budget sequels which seem to believe that more is more, and are often criticised for doing too much. Well, I'm gearing up to receive similar criticisms because now that I've done more than enough setup, I'm going to spend the rest of this video talking glowingly about Wonder Woman 1984 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Although Peter Parker is a boy from New York who was bitten by a radioactive spider, and Diana Prince is a warrior princess from mythical Themyscira, these heroes have a lot in common. They both invent an exaggerated version of themselves to fight crime, and they both keep their true identities a secret, not just from the world but also from the people who are closest to them, for as long as they can, granted, quite badly.
How did you... Simple self-defense. Used his own momentum against him. I'll teach you.
What happened to your face? It's filthy.
It is?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was cleaning the chimney.
We have no chimney.
What?
Keeping this secret identity often makes them very isolated, and in these films they are only one loss away from no one in the world understanding who they really are. In these iterations of the characters, they are also both inhabiting Chosen One archetypes, with Peter's parents having set in motion the events that would lead to him becoming Spider-Man, and with Diana being, well, the daughter of literal gods. Now that's certainly not my favourite part of these characters, but I think it works in these movies because they're both in a kind of doubt and consequences stage of the hero's journey. Wonder Woman loses her powers and Spider-Man effectively gives up on his one true love, New York. And both of their best friends turn into monsters, largely as fallout from this Chosen One narrative, but more on them in a bit. In these movies, there's even some overlap in the way the heroes move about. Wonder Woman spends some time swinging from clouds and Spider-Man has a crack at flying. But one of my favourite things about these two heroes in these two movies is how much we see them saving people. Regular, ordinary passers-by and people on the street. And not just from death. This guy probably wasn't going to die, but Wonder Woman cares that he's probably about to receive a horrible back injury, so she helps him. She didn't have to do that, and it makes it all the more special. Because the thing is, Wonder Woman and Spider-Man aren't heroes because they have powers. All of the villains in these movies get powers, and it corrupts them. What makes Wonder Woman and Spider-Man unique is that they struggle with the burden that's been thrown upon them. They take the difficult path, the path to do good. All of these pressures weigh heavily on Wonder Woman and Spider-Man alike. They're isolated, afraid of losing the one person who truly knows them, burdened with glorious purpose, so to speak, and still all they want to do is to protect every citizen crossing the street, inspire every person who's lost hope, comfort every child in danger, help the villain who's out of control, and take care of everyone in the world. That's what's most beautiful about these characters, and I think it shines through in both of these films. Nothing is allowed to be easy for these heroes, but they do it anyway. How can I summarize this point really beautifully? They bring people together with the lasso of truth and the web of connection. And does that make sense? Maybe just cut that bit out. I don't know. Let's move on to the next bit. To me, there's something inherently silly and ridiculous about all blockbuster filmmaking. Both of these films had a budget over $200 million, and at that point, I don't think you're just making a movie anymore. At that point, you've hired an army and you're using Vaseline, gaffer tape, and eyeliner to make literal dreams come true. At that point, I almost hope the director will get a little kooky or a little high-minded or a little absurd. I love big, weird sequels in general. I'd happily defend The Matrix Resurrections anytime. Except now, I need to stay on topic as much as I can right now. And sure, Wonder Woman 1984 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 aren't exactly kooky, weird, absurd films where the style really takes over and becomes all of the substance. That'd be fun. But there is the sense that the filmmakers are really capital G going for it, and if anything, they've crammed in more than they should have. It's why I get excited to go to the cinema to see films like these, and not to alienate the remaining viewers I still have on site after all the films I've said I like so far, but this is often my solitary disappointment with Pixar movies. Most of them are, if anything, perhaps too well written. Sometimes it can feel like a computer could have written them. The structure is perfect, the arcs and setups and payoffs are unimpeachable by any professor of screenwriting. I mean, I think I'm in the minority here, but where's the fun in that? I get excited when I can see blood in the work. I want to see a dangerous cocktail of ideas, characters, and stories that maybe haven't been properly and scientifically measured before they burst all over the big screen. Now again, I'm not saying that these two movies are truly as dangerous or eccentric as they could be, but they're not that. Take the opening scenes, for example. Both of these films have grandiose cold opens which don't feature any of the main cast and could easily be cut without impacting the primary story of the film. So why are they there? These movies are already really long. I can only imagine there would have been a lot of pressure to chop them. All that the Spider-Man cold open sets up is more of Peter's destiny plot, which comes up again towards the end of the film. But I don't think anyone walked out of this movie thinking, oh, I'm glad we got that bit at the start with the parents uploading something on the laptop so that I knew that what was going on when Peter found the vlogs at the end. It's unnecessary. And in Wonder Woman's cold open, an ambitious young Diana wants to win at a race badly enough that she cheats.
You took the short path. You cheated, Diana.
Thereby, in one fell swoop, setting up the themes of the film. Be wary of ambition, don't be a cheater, and you can't always have what you want.
I renounce my wish.
So that's nice, but I think the main thrust of the film's plot communicates all of those themes just fine, so there's no real need for this table setting. I doubt many audiences even picked up on these connections to the themes. It took me a few watches before I realized that that's what this is all about. And if I'm thinking about themes, then sure, Spider-Man's cold open ties into that movie's theme as well. The very subtle theme of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Don't know if you caught it.
I always thought that I'd have more time.
I told you I am running a bit late.
Time is luck.
All the crime fighting you've been doing, and all of a sudden you take time out to come visit little old me, Max.
I don't want to intrude. I know it's been a long time. Yeah, I just wish I had time for eventually.
I just figured it was time.
What time is it?
We just need a bit more time
to figure out something else. Time! Max, we don't have much time!
It's time to meet our destiny.
Time to impact.
4.5 minutes?
Clock it. Clock it right now.
Either way, I wouldn't say there's much substance in these opening sequences, but my argument is, and this ties very nicely into my overall point for this entire video, there's a lot of style here. Little Diana is super cute, and watching her best a slew of athletic warrior women at a kind of colossal fantasy game of Wipeout, all to a sublime heart-racing suite by Hans Zimmer, it's a real delight. Then there's Spider-Man, which jolts the audience awake by opening with one of the most chaotic plane crashes in cinema, where you get to watch Peter Parker's parents die in the most extravagant way possible. Woohoo! I said woohoo sarcastically there, but seriously, these are fun rides. Oh, but also, if you count this deleted scene as canon, Peter's father is actually not dead, so...
You're dead!
I'm not dead, Peter.
Anyway, these openers warm us up for the main event, and do manage to tell us a little bit about where our heroes come from. Diana from wisdom and Peter from determination. It's extravagant world building you can only do with a lot of time and a lot of money, and I for one am ultimately glad that these scenes were not cut. And that's not to imply that studio meddling isn't a huge factor in the creative decisions on display in these films. It definitely is. If you spend over $200 million on a couple of hours of video, a lot of people are going to have a say on what they think should and shouldn't be in it. But I say bravo to the directors, Mark Webb and Patty Jenkins, for how they walked that tightrope of trying to please everyone while also somewhat creating the thing that they wanted. Kevin Feige's notes on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 leaked several years back, and they're very interesting. Most of them were ignored by the filmmakers. Some of them sound like great ideas to me, but others sound like Feige trying to destroy the reasons I like this movie. For example, he advises them to tone down Paul Giamatti's performance, so he seems a bit more menacing and less cartoonish. Well, I think that's an awful note. Rhino is supposed to be a joke in this movie. He represents every ridiculous run-of-the-mill Spidey villain. He's there at the start of the movie and again at the end, and Spider-Man sorts him out with ease. He's the kind of villain we're supposed to imagine Spider-Man is fighting in between these big epic movies. He's a regular day out for Spider-Man. In Wonder Woman, he's this guy. Essentially a kind of pathetic criminal. Rhino is supposed to come across as a benign threat compared to Electro or the Green Goblin. The fact that Giamatti is having fun with the role only helps with that. Several beats in these early sequences which are supposed to be funny, I actually do find funny, which I can't say for many blockbusters. Again, pointing out things that I like about the film, Feige also points out that there's too much back and forth with Peter and Gwen, and that Andrew's performance is all over the place. A lot of crying and then a lot of mania. The angst and raw emotion Andrew Garfield gets to play while also being the quirky, fun optimist is what I find a bit lacking in some of the happy-go-lucky Tom Holland movies. There is, no doubt, a lot of crying in both of these movies, and Feige might not like that, but I do. But it's worth noting that it seems to me that Feige's notes arise from his viewing of an early cut of the film without a lot of the visual effects, and that's obviously a pretty big deal for visual effects movies like these, and I think for the most part, the effects here are top tier. Spider-Man swinging the streets of New York has to this day never looked better. There are sequences like the fireworks flight in Wonder Woman which make no sense, but I'm willing to forgive them because they're just kind of beautiful and wondrous. I think most of the action is brilliant. Our heroes are at the height of their abilities, so the combat is depicted as easy and graceful, and often effortless when fighting regular people, then brutal and visceral when fighting stronger foes. But in this aspect too, these films are leaning into colour, beauty and fluidity more than grit and realism. One of the great pleasures of spending time with these incredible superheroes is watching them enjoy their abilities. And you get that with Spider-Man's gymnastic movements, with him climbing up his web like a rope, and you get it with this shot that I love of Gal Gadot rocking her head to the side as if running faster than a car is nothing to her. And watching her learn to fly for the first time is a vicarious joy vividly depicted. Both of these films are just so brilliantly bright and colourful in a way that most of the MCU has been afraid of. They don't have to try to be ultra cool, modern, grounded thrillers. They instead embrace the costumes, the quips, the comedy, and the melodrama that these comic book heroes are capable of. I don't see melodrama as an acquired taste so much as a forgotten taste. It's clear from Shakespeare plays that a lot of people loved the larger-than-life paintbrush back then. It's arguably only quite recently that there's been this popular obsession with things being really grounded and restrained.
Realism is an approach, just as formalism is, and great filmmaking involves knowing when and how to choose the right approach.
One of the most pulpy narrative draws of films like this is the profound aesthetic transformation of the characters. Of course, our heroes are constantly transforming between their two distinct identities, but at the same time, all of the other characters, on some level attempting to emulate the hero, undertake grotesque transformations of their own. I'll never stop being fascinated by these transformations. Like Darth Vader, or Gollum, or the Lich King, these stories remind us of the profound and sometimes horrifying potential within us all to change into a completely different person. This is, of course, a staple of superhero stories, particularly villain origin stories, but Wonder Woman 1984 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 really lean into these arcs, with not one but two dramatic aesthetic villain transformations in each film. In both of these films, our hero is introduced or reintroduced to a person who is essentially their best friend. Peter's childhood friend Harry Osborn and Diana's work colleague Barbara Minerva. Both have kind of funny hair and things are a little frosty the first time we meet them. But they very quickly warm up and everyone gets along swimmingly. Barbara wants to be special.
Like Diana.
And so does he.
I'm not a loser.
And him.
Because you're special.
Harry, on the other hand, just wants to survive his fatal genetic disease and becomes fixated on getting Spider-Man's blood because of its self-healing qualities. Thus, Harry turns green with envy, and Barbara's jealousy makes her catty? She turns into a cheetah. Could it be more on the nose?
You cheated, Diana.
And again, I have to keep reiterating, I'm saying things like on the nose and cliche and two-dimensional, but I don't necessarily mean them as bad things. These are epic cautionary tales for the ages, and I think they're allowed to be transparent as hell. Hiding your film's messaging behind a cool veneer of subtlety may be the popular modern thing to do, but it's not necessarily more intelligent, let alone wise. I mean, how is it that so many of us have been raised on stories with great messages, but so many of us are still frankly dickheads to each other? Perhaps we need to be hit over the head with didactic stories over and over again. Perhaps these are the films we deserve. I've gone a bit far here, I got a bit worked up. Can we take a break for a sponsor or something? We don't have any sponsors? How about a spiel about my YouTube channel, why they should subscribe? No, I don't want to do that. Well, let's just steam on ahead then, I guess. I haven't heard a lot of appreciation for this Harry Osborn, but I think Dane DeHaan is a perfect pick. His off-kilter swagger and ridiculous fringe are entirely veritable in the son of amoral industrialist Norman Osborn. Ever since the comics, Harry Osborn has been a literally cursed character, destined to live a painful and tragic life. And as I think you can probably understand by now, that is exactly what I love to see. Suffering is storytelling. Text on screen for emphasis. So I love how pained Dane DeHaan looks, how much agony he inhabits, how unwell he frankly appears to be, even before he begins to undergo his transition into the horrible Green Goblin. Plus, I think I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the modern faux James Dean type. And Kristen Wiig's journey as Barbara is clear and fiery, if somewhat quick. At the top, the filmmakers pull out all the cliches to make us like her, then she quickly chooses the path of fear. Both of these friends becoming less likable as the plot goes on is, I think, quite very intentional.
Where's your warmth, your joy, your humanity?
Both are taking the dark path. They're encountering similar challenges to those our heroes have faced, but they're making alternative, less altruistic choices. And the awkward, funny, goofy friends we had turn to cold, cruel, self-serious enemies.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man!
As jealousy turns to hate, the friends mutate into their final forms, which is where the true aesthetic transformation takes place. I think the cheetah design works because it's eerie, creepy, and weird. You look at her and go, nah, I wouldn't wish to be that. And the goblin design is fantastic. Mad, wicked, unhinged. Dane DeHaan plays this chaotic goblin with a furious, unpredictable, sinister sneer. I particularly like the body horror of his transformation. But I've heard the original cut was even more gruesome and horrifying, and I would have loved to see that. The main villain in both of these movies, however, is a man called Max. Both have delusions of grandeur, both are insulted when the hero treats them just like they would anyone else, and both seek as much power as they can possibly get, without regard for the destruction of their own bodies. There's nothing really new here. Again, these are stories most of us are already familiar with, but they are, I would argue, stories that are worth retelling, and they are told here with enough gusto and zest to make me very much enjoy the journey. I think Pedro Pascal as Max Lord might be my favourite part of Wonder Woman 1984. He gets more of an arc than Jamie Foxx in Spider-Man, who admittedly is pretty much just a Spider-Man fanatic who gets pissed off when confronted with the reality that Spider-Man is not his best friend. From the get-go, Max Lord is, and here we go again with my dastardly delights, really suffering. He has nothing, he wants everything, and of course what he needs has been right under his nose the whole time. His delightfully disgusting nose. He's a great character to watch because he is so very desperate, and there are things that he truly cares about. The scenes with his son are definitely highlights.
Don't you see that my greatness is your greatness? Huh?
Then I wish for your greatness.
No.
And with each poor decision the character makes, I am equally understanding of his reasons and horrified by what he is becoming. There's also all of this.
You don't need a pile of money or some business degree to get started.
Well, it takes time to become a great #1 man like your dad is going to be.
You're lying to your son like you lie to everyone else. Didn't take long to find out you're nothing but a low-life con man.
I am not a con man!
I'm a television personality.
I am not a loser. He's a loser. He's a liar.
And he's wrong. It's a conspiracy against my success.
Why not wish for more?
That could have been so naff, so very naff, but I actually think they played it just right. At the end of the film, we get a short flashback to a young Max Lord. It allows us to better understand his desperation and what led him to be so disastrously ambitious. However, it's a credit to the film and the performance that I think you could cut this scene out and it wouldn't really matter. We've already seen the profound vulnerability of the character along his journey. We can feel that he's spiraling out of control far beyond anything he ever intended. But it is interesting to see his noble beginnings, and again how, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's telling that the heartwarming moment at the end of this film is granted to the primary villain. These films are just as much about the villains as they are the heroes. I also particularly enjoyed the aligning of the villains. The moment when they come together and synchronize into a common cause is, again, nothing new, but certainly satisfying to watch. It's fun to see a couple of sympathetic loners bolster each other up, even if they're egotistically bent on world destruction and all that. When they do this in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, they say to hell with subtext.
I need you.
You need me.
Yes, I need you. You are my only chance that I have at surviving.
You need me.
Yes, I need you. I need you, please. 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 I know what it's like to be thrown away. Please, Max. I need you.
Isn't Max Dillon just a wonderful two-dimensional character? A man who thinks he's special and that Spider-Man is his best friend falls into a vat of mutant electrical eels, goes through a horrifying rebirth, Then Spider-Man forgets his name, so he goes on a rampage. Makes sense to me. There's something brilliant about the low stakes of Spider-Man's betrayal, of forgetting Max's name.
How could you forget me?
Oh, I do. I know it. Don't tell me.
It's Max.
It's a Max?
Yes.
Again, like Rhino, pointing a bit of fun at the inherent ludicrosity of all of these villains. At the same time, it's not even that unrealistic. Many, many people in the real world are this easily offended by the tiniest of perceived slights. They just usually don't have the power of the grid to take revenge. Electro provides some amazing visuals throughout the film. I was going to say that only his ending disappoints me, when he's defeated and forgotten without much of a second thought, but actually, to those of us who cared, Spider-Man No Way Home kind of sorts that out. The storytellers seem to understand that all of these characters, and the heroes in particular, function best when they do not get what they want. The hero's persistence despite unceasing suffering is what I like about them. And this is most evident in the romantic arcs, which are a significant portion of these films. Perhaps more than superhero stories, these are love stories. From the outset, these romances are shrouded in doom. The previous installment of both stories featured the death or near death of the love interest, and it casts a shadow over the beginning of these sequels. Peter is still seeing visions of Gwen's late father, a warning of the inevitable tragedy to come if Peter continues to involve Gwen in his dangerous life. And things are more or less just as morbid for Diana, whose sweetheart Steve died years ago and she still hasn't been able to move on. But then, he magically reappears.
I wish we had more time.
Oh yeah, time is kinda a theme in Wonder Woman as well. What did I tell you? These films are very similar. Anyway, Diana embraces Steve's return, dismissing the lingering sense of doom for her and Earth that his return entails. And just as Diana and Steve are reunited, after several back and forths and a deliciously melodramatic deal of angsty uncertainty, Peter and Gwen get together properly. In both films, I find myself easily rooting for these relationships. It's obvious that these pairings like each other, and you can clearly see why they like each other. These romantic interests are smart, funny, and even though they're regular old mortals, both very useful in a dangerous set piece.
I just learned that.
And maybe there are a couple of awkward beats.
Have you been following me?
Just once a day. Sometimes. Sometimes more.
Yeah, I just followed you like a creep.
But hey, at least these guys are being honest. The sincere depiction of these relationships is all the more reason to be devastated when the time comes for final goodbyes, with both love interests being brave enough to accept the consequences of their part in the story much more readily than our heroes.
I'm already gone.
You can't be here right now. This is insane.
Guess what? Nobody makes my decisions for me. All right? Nobody. This is my choice.
Again, anything to make our heroes suffer more just makes me enjoy these films more. Unlike Spider-Man at the end of Spider-Man 2, these heroes do actually have to take that Aunt May's advice.
Sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most.
Despite being $200 million blockbusters, the message of acceptance and not being able to have everything you want is quite countercultural. It's pretty fascinating how the ambitions of the villains are denigrated.
Never accept the limitations of nature.
You can have it all! You just have to want it!
I'm usually pretty big on the romantic, anything is possible, you can achieve your dreams kind of soppy stuff, but that doesn't mean that there isn't heaps of truth to the other side of the coin. And it's perhaps no wonder that these are the kinds of stories we're telling ourselves when we're trapped in the cycle of capitalism and all that. But hey, I think that's a different video.
The answer is always more.
I'd like to spend a moment longer to appreciate the madness of the final acts of these films. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter and Gwen have just decided to move to England together. However, not only is Electro on the loose and at the height of his powers, his blackouts are causing major disruptions at the hospital Aunt May is working at, And we even cut several times to air traffic control filled with characters we have never seen before as they try to deal with the impending catastrophe of a pair of commercial airplanes colliding in the air above New York. And that's all before the Green Goblin arrives and kills Gwen. Seemingly in an attempt to one-up this, at the end of Wonder Woman 1984, not only has Diana just said goodbye forever again to her one true love, but she also learns to fly for the first time, electrocutes her best friend who is now suddenly a cat person who hates her, and is confronting Max Lord at these secret satellite headquarters where he's telling everyone in the entire world to make wishes in their heads because he now has the power to make all wishes come true. These clips of the ensuing chaos around the world, from wars breaking out to whole nations crumbling to the US president launching the nukes, it's so bombastic and insane that I want to give whoever at Warner Brothers was distracted enough while reading the script to okay it a big high five. It's brilliant. I understand that it's this kind of ludicrous climax that disorientates and turns off many audiences. But if, like me, you've been raised on Doctor Who, where the conclusion of every second season is a world or galaxy-ending event that comes down to a test of humanity's very belief in itself, then you can take this kind of madness in stride. And if you can accept it, if you can extend your suspension of disbelief far enough to go with this, then maybe you can appreciate that what's happening here is amazing. Every single person in the world is getting whatever it is that they want, and this blockbuster superhero movie is having a go at showing us a little bit of what that might look like. Surely this is one of the purest purposes of a film that costs over $200 million. If a massive budget superhero movie can't tell a story like this, who can? Then, at the heart of it all, we've got Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, a beacon of optimism, a fountain of hope, doing what she does best, pouring her heart out, speaking up for what she believes in, trading in her fists for compassionate words. Oh, and her lasso of truth, which she uses not just to speak to Max Lord, and not just to every person in this fictional 1984 world, but also to us, to every person watching the film. She literally does the look to camera. Talk about ballsy, talk about didactic, talk about wearing your heart on your sleeve, talk about saying stuff you to the cool modern thriller and just going for something open-hearted and honest. Yes, it's naff, yes, it's silly, yes, it's comic book movie in the cheesiest sense, but whoever told you that that was a bad thing, I just don't think they had the best intentions for you when they said it. These are the kinds of actions I want to see from our mythical heroes. I'm more than happy for idealistic heroes like Wonder Woman or Spider-Man or Robin Hood or Doctor Who to be as speechified as they like. There's no point trying to trick ourselves into thinking we aren't telling these stories to ourselves for a reason. And it's because we love the idea that all of us could actually be, with the right motivation, our best selves. All that said, I do have some reservations about the final beats of these films. The happy, or at least very bittersweet endings gave me all the right warm and fuzzies in all the right places, but I can't help but wonder if we should have been kept in despair. What if the cheetah had drowned, and Wonder Woman was really forced to reckon with her own impact on the people around her? What if Spider-Man had, as per the original plan for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that was chopped and changed during production, not been able to control the grief and the rage, nearly beating his friend to death and rejecting the path of the hero? As it is, both of these films end with the hero accepting their place in the world and essentially promising to continue the good fight. But I can't help but wonder what an Empire Strikes Back type cliffhanger would have been like. At the very least, it probably would have fast-tracked a follow-up film, whereas currently, although Wonder Woman 3 is on the way and The Amazing Spider-Man 3 might be in the works, both are taking their sweet time. On the other hand, I do appreciate how these films really want to give me everything and wrap it up in a nice bow. A complete and satisfying dose of these superheroes without any loose threads, except for the obligatory, elaborate sequel teasers, which I see as one of the lamest tropes of modern cinema, but whatever. I haven't actually talked much about the leads, Andrew Garfield and Gal Gadot, but I think they're just brilliant, both very charming and charismatic. They get to play the full range of human emotion in these films. Gadot captures the reserved wisdom of one who has lived a very long life, and Garfield captures the wit and exuberant physicality of a young New Yorker bold enough to dress up in a costume and fight crime. They both pour their hearts and souls into these characters, and judging by the actors' statements and actions outside these films, they really seem to have a profound attachment to these characters. In most discussion about these films, you'll hear a lot about the CGI, or the plot, or the action choreography, but one important element that goes really underappreciated is this. It is so important to see and believe that Wonder Woman loves Earth and Spider-Man loves New York. And these films nail that ingredient. These heroes clearly love the people around them so much. Even the villains, our heroes will go to such extreme lengths to help them, because no matter what they've done or what trouble they're in, these are humans and New Yorkers, and our Spider-Man and Wonder Woman are led by love, not fear. This was a long video. I thought it was going to be much shorter. Actually, I thought I probably wouldn't make it because I got thinking about how I might not have a very rational perspective on these films, by which I mean, basically, I've read the criticism of these films, which is thorough and wide-ranging, but at the end of the day, I don't really understand a lot of it. As you've well and truly gathered by now, I genuinely like these movies, and that means on a certain level, I just don't see what everyone else means when they say horrible things about them. It's like when a kid says something cute and weird like, "I want you to eat a poo cake ice cream," and you understand the words they said, but you have no idea how it relates to reality. So I was overthinking all that, but then I was like, hey, it doesn't look like anyone else is going to make this video, so I'd better just get it out of my system. So here it is. And the thing is, here's my last bit. The thing is, particularly these days, our opinions, and I definitely include myself in this, our opinions are so extensively constructed by the views of others that we hear, read, and consume. Sometimes all it takes to appreciate a film a bit more, or to find some things to like in a film that you didn't enjoy, is to hear someone else praise it. So maybe, if you like, you can let my positive and objectively correct opinions in this video sway you just a little bit on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Wonder Woman 1984, a couple of big, bloated, bombastic, silly, overdone superhero sequels I adore.